Alrighty, let's get going. Let's get started. Uh, Really excited to be talking product roadmaps here today with John. Uh, John's with us from the US. It's very late there. It's very nice of him to be be sitting up a bit late to come and talk to us all. Uh, John, do you mind just flipping the slide, and I'm going to blow that one up. Do you want to jump to the next slide? And I'll do a quick intro about myself. So I'm Scott. I'm the CEO and founder of Terram. Terram's on the AFR, Fast 100, 2 years running. We're a product development and delivery firm. And I've been involved in over 61 product launches. Love building products, which is why I'm very, very excited today to talk to John. John, it's really not every day that you get to hear directly from someone like John. John's been on every side of product. He's worked as an engineer, building real innovation. He's ran large product and engineering teams. He's advised product teams, and he sits on the board of public companies. So when he's talking about roadmaps, he's talking about it from every single angle you could look at a roadmap from. Years of experience there. I'm going to hand over to John now because John's the one that we all want to chat to today. But jump in at any time, ask questions. Really, we want it to be more of a discussion than a presentation. So please ask questions, and we'll try and get to them during the presentation or at the end. But I'm going to hand over to John and let John get stuck into it. I think some call outs are the kind of companies John works with: Apple, Amazon. Yeah, John, over to you.
Okay. Well, glad to be here, Scott. Thanks so much for inviting
Yeah, that's great.
me. Can you hear me? Yes? No?
Can we get a bit of a thumbs up if you can hear John okay?
Hello, 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me okay?
All right, technology. All
Jeez.
right, let's get going. This is what we call the duct tape solution to roadmaps.
You have to be inventive. Well, thanks everybody, and sorry about this. We spent a half an hour debugging this, and of course, given it's kind of like a demo, it fails when you actually try it, so you know it's real. Anyway, I wanted to start out with the problem. And the problem in roadmaps, I think, was evidenced by a recent client interaction I had with a pretty large technology company. And I was working with this guy, Steve. And unfortunately, the company lacked a strategy, and the CEO admitted that. But nevertheless, tasked Steve with going out and doing product roadmaps for the organization. But unfortunately, it was without a strategy, and unfortunately, there was no clear purpose. In other words, it didn't fit into any management flow. Furthermore, he lacked the skills to do it, and he designated a committee. So the result was no roadmaps, not tied to strategy, and no purpose, yielding wasted time. So what I'd like to do is tell you how you can address some of those issues and effectively use product roadmaps to enable your organization to really execute. And I'd like to describe 3 ways. And in fact, the 3 ways are 3 ways in which I think you can really benefit from these. Well, it's really all about time. It's really about executing strategy. If I look at the purpose of most organizations, the purpose is, in fact, to make strategy executable. In other words, most organizations, maybe yours, have a fairly good strategy that has been outlined and communicated, but in fact, it's all up to the organization to fulfill or execute that. So I would say, the first order, the most important thing is to be able to execute on your strategy. And it's all in first mover advantage. So it's critically important that you understand how you could potentially use this, unlike Steve, to be successful. Well, if you look at roadmaps, I believe there's not just 3 benefits of having a product roadmap. There's more. One typically thinks of only one benefit, but in fact, that's not the case. They can help you communicate strategy. They can inform execution. They can help you increase revenue. But it's not through one roadmap. It's not through one management flow. It's not with one set of customers. It's not with one set of managers. And so roadmaps, to be effective, good product roadmaps know what problem they're solving and what audience needs from them. Let's talk about what's at stake here, really. Done wrong, they're often a waste. As the example that I described with Steve, which is a real example, it's often a meaningless exercise, where in fact the purpose is unclear. And I know from many organizations, some, very bright, eager person in product marketing does them, but they're ignored. However, done right, they can communicate strategy, they can inform your execution, and they can increase revenue. And they can do that by serving these 3 different managers or audiences and insert them in the proper management flow. One of the things that I do when I am asked to do a presentation, Scott asked me to help out here, is and I look at what people are saying about the topic, and you know what's really funny? I don't look at the answers, I look at the questions. But in this case, the answers really stood out for me. And in this case, someone had, and this is a true story, suggested that Trello be used as a tool for roadmap. I kid you not. And I like Trello. I use it. I think it's terrific. It's a Kanban system that has a description of what's going to be done, what you're doing, and what's done. Very effective tool for agile development, Kanban. But the lesson here is don't use roadmaps as a way of describing backlog. Don't use tools that are not designed for them. Excel is much better than Trello for doing roadmaps. And don't use them as a substitute, like in Steve's organization, for overall strategy. Roadmaps communicate strategy. They don't generate strategy. Corporate strategy typically is financial strategy, organizational strategy, M&A strategy, and product strategy. Product is only 1/4 of the overall corporate strategy. But roadmaps are the way of communicating it, and the way of communicating USPs and the headline features to your developers and your teams working on these programs. And also it's useful for communicating meaning. So in fact, strategy can be a roadmap, product roadmaps can be a real enabler for you. Well, I described 3 audience management flows, 3 purposes. What are they? Well, the first is the strategic roadmap, and I think that's what most of us normally think of, which is we think about a situation where, in fact, we're trying to communicate the product element of the overall corporate strategy. And these graphical tools are incredibly useful because everybody's graphical contribution, conception, and understanding, or at least most people, is superior to their understanding of the written word. So graphics are powerful. It can show relative performance, like competitive performance, so indicate gaps. And if you're smart about it and clever, you can actually do a simple P&L. The execution roadmap, which is different management flows, different customers, has different information, is vital for communicating dependency because it basically indicates the relative timing of programs and how some programs can be deliverables of others. detail and timing to organizations that need it, such as marketing and sales besides development. And then finally, there's a different roadmap. It's more different than the other two, which is a sales roadmap. And in general, it communicates the timing of releases and their headline features and why you as a user would want to wait for the next release. In other words, it supports sales efforts. So these are the three roadmaps that you can use to help you communicate strategy, inform execution, and increase sales. Let me show you how. So first, let's figure out where they fit from the management flow. So if we look on the left-hand side of this diagram, we've got the product portfolio. That's the relative investment we take in risky programs, which are transformational, adjacent programs, which involve maybe a little market risk, but no technology risk, or vice versa. And then our core, which is markets and customers and technologies we currently serve. That, along with the strategy, feeds the strategic roadmap. Portfolios are a snapshot in time. Roadmaps are a flow over time, and that's the fundamental difference. That's why Trello doesn't work well. It's a snapshot. So if we look at the sequence here, you can see that strategic roadmaps are the connective tissue between strategy and budgets and priorities. We look at execution roadmaps. They help teams coordinate better and execute faster and make sure the dependencies are not slowing up other programs. And finally, the sales roadmaps are generated when the product is near release. Three roadmaps, 8 process flows, management flows, and 3 sets of customers, all very different. You can look at this organizationally. This ties back to the opening slide, which is that if you look at strategic roadmaps, they're primarily the C-suite communicating out to help optimize and communicate the strategy. Execution roadmaps are used within teams to help ensure that they minimize dependencies and delays. And finally, sales roadmaps are used to communicate outside the organization. But to be useful, they have to focus on their purpose. Let's talk about some examples. So I've got some examples here. Scott, your email, we can send you the Excel templates for all of these as well as this presentation.
Oh,
so
awesome.
if you'd like to get live Excel spreadsheets, we'll be happy to supply them for you. So this is an example. We're taking an example of a software company that is developing a photo editing application that provides image filtering and can automatically generate emojis for mobile phone applications. And this particular company has 3 products. They've got a web-based product that's a desktop. They've got a client product that works on mobile and another client that works on tablet. They've got basically three instantiations. And those are shown as vertical bands or horizontal bands here. You can see in the mobile, we've got Edit Quick, which is the mobile release. We've got V2.0 and a launch in December of 2019, and then followed by Edit Quick 2. Tablet similarly has a launch a little bit later and has a number of tasks under it, such as scaling algorithms, speed algorithms, and 16-bit or full color bit depth. And finally, there's a cloud-based version.
John,
these roadmaps, strategic roadmaps, are aligned with strategy, supports the financial plan, connects strategy and budgets, and you can actually see below there are three sets of rows: headcount and revenue for the first, the mobile app; headcount and revenue for the second app, which is the tablet; headcount and revenue for the third app, which is cloud. So in one diagram, you can not only communicate the product vision of the organization, show how it's aligned in strategy, but you can also do a proxy P&L, because you can actually apply a weighted cost for each headcount to determine your cost, which is dominated by development, quality, and product. And so you can simply piece together in one snapshot what your future P&L looks like.
John,
There's a variant of this.
just to
I'd like to share.
John,
Go
can
ahead.
you I'm just so just on that previous one you've got, it looks great, but like the often see that the devil's in the detail, or it's this nice simple summary, but then how do you know the revenues that's going to be generated? Is this a team's come up with it, or is this kind of one person sitting down making a bit of a hypothesis about what they think's going to happen, or how do you arrive at this beautiful strategic roadmap with revenue answers, P&L answers?
Scott, you know the answer to this. It's product organization working alongside the sales organization, but it's on your dime. In other words, it's got to come from the chief marketing officer or the director of managers. They, working with sales, comes up with these sales figures. So they're forecast in the future, obviously. Now, you can see for Edit Quick 1, I'm showing revenue before it's launched. You can see $2 million in the July 2019 month. That's because there was Edit Quick version D.1 that was already spinning up revenue. So any case where the product's in market, you can fill in those figures. But Scott, it's on your back end product to come up with those figures. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, keep going. Yep.
Okay, great. I don't mean to be, this should not be theoretical. This should be absolutely what you do and execute in companies from 5 to 500. So this is based on practical experience and applying this. It's not theoretical. This is kind of a bonus or a derivative of the other strategic map. And this shows competition and positioning. And I love this map because it describes the phenomena that I call shooting ahead of the duck, which is that when you're planning a product launch, you don't want to plan to beat where your customers are or your competitors are today, but you want to beat them at time of launch. So in this company's case, Edit Quick, their big competitor is Photoshop CC. And you can see their mobile version performs faster. It has lower latency than Edit Quick does. And you can see a reddish-orange disadvantage and an arrow going down. And then they launch, and they find out that, in fact, Photoshop has upped their game, but they've upped it more. So there's a green advantage. So roadmaps can actually help you predict where you need to be competitively in shooting in front of the duck.
And does that kind of mean, I mean, trying to plan out your competitors' roadmap as well?
You bet, Scott. And whose responsibility is that?
That's product again, right?
You got it. It's who's on this call. It's your job to do competitive analysis. That's why they pay you so much money. Right?
If only.
You've got to be on top of your competitors and do competitive analysis, figure out the important USPs, extrapolate those USPs, and then nail them.
Yep. Yeah, so there's just there's lots of roadmaps feeding into informing your own. It's not, I mean, what I'm really taking from what you're saying is having multiple roadmaps is really where you need to be at. Not the typical single Trello board or just single, like, we're going to release blah in the next month, but to really do it well, you want to have your competitors' roadmaps, your own roadmaps at different levels and for different functions.
Exactly. Purpose, audience, and frankly, formulated to their needs and customized towards it. But absolutely right. We're talking about more than one. Let me move on and share with you another, which is on execution. So now we're talking about how roadmaps can actually use to help teams manage dependency. This is probably more the CTO on the CTO's back and the PMO's back, the program management office's back. And the idea is to look at the specific APIs or deliverables of some of the teams. Again, I've got mobile, tablet, and cloud laid out as rows. Time is the x-axis here, and you can see the deliverables of one team. The tablet team got some real hotshot engineers in color and speed and scaling. Websites mastered colors. But the mobile team, which generates the most revenue, which you saw 2 slides ago, needs their deliverable outcomes in order to hit their goals. So this kind of roadmap really shows execution and dependencies, which is quite useful for teams trying to hit their timeline goals. And finally, let's talk about sales roadmap.
Hey John, just before you jump to the next one, there's a question which is any best practices when constructing a competitor's roadmap, aside from breaking into the building and downloading their files, I guess, which is not recommended.
Right. No, I would. Yeah, you can look at their dumpsters, sure. No, there are a couple ways. I think one is to monitor forums. You can see how their customer service reps are answering questions from users. Potentially, you could get a copy of their sales roadmap. Usually that's given out under NDA, but not all firms do that, and you might be able to get that from one of your customers who was sold this as good in B2B. And the third case is kind of the old-fashioned way, which is you look at adjacent technologies and products, see what they're doing, and extrapolate to your product, i.e. color depth or responsiveness or whatever. So I think you can get good market indicators from a number of different viewpoints, from your customers, from forums and other chat resources, social media, as well as looking at what adjacent companies are doing.
Well, I think you mentioned Trello. Even Trello, I'm not sure if they still do it, but they definitely had a Trello board that announced their entire roadmap to the world, because it was a way of collaborating with their users. And a lot of companies are using those get feedback style sites where people can submit and vote on what's coming next.
Terrific. Well, that could be great, and I saw that also in the Quora forums. But some of the detail or nuances that are presented in the roadmaps that you've just seen are specifically timing, past, present, and future, not at the granular level, but at a corporate level. And also, Trello's not good for salespeople. So if you look at the next roadmap, this is what you would use for a sales roadmap. Now, I don't have the skills of the product people in this room. I'm an engineer. But what I can say is if you look at what's typically used as we call a sales roadmap, they're very different. So notice the timing. Scott, if you see the timing, it's in halves. It's not in quarters, and there's no month granularity. It's very general, very vague. And also, what's communicated, here we've got the mobile, because that's the money offering, and then desktop, which supports it. Tablet is derivative. We have the key USP features. So the customers, and the key point of this, and this is primarily a B2B tool, is the key customers don't wait or rather do wait for the next release and don't switch to competitors, because you're describing when they'll get the new features and what they'll get. It's important that these are approved by legal and either determine that you need an NDA with your customer to share them, or in fact, if they go wild, they're okay. But as you can see, the sales roadmap, although it's related to the other roadmaps that I've shown, it's much more like a cartoon that's slick and glossy and focuses on the key features and benefits as well as icons or screenshots.
And John, how do you balance because it's the strategic, which is where's technology going, what's our vision for what we're going to take to customers. There's balancing that with like what do customers understand, which is more the sales roadmap, putting it in your customers' terms and language. How do you think about balancing the two? Is it a case of iteration, come at it from one point of view, try the next point of view, try and marry them up? Because it's all well and good to say we're going to have the fastest, least latency, emoji sharing tool ever in the history, but maybe customers don't want that. Maybe they just want a greater option of emojis. I'm just kind of, or maybe they're not ready for it yet. Maybe the timing's wrong. I'm really curious how you think about strategy versus sales.
Right, right. So I put this chart up which shows the process, the sequence. And basically, and this really highlights one of the biggest dilemmas in product management, and that is the dual dichotomy, the devil of inbound marketing and outbound marketing. Outbound marketing creates the sales roadmap. They launch projects, they train customers, or if it's B2C, communicate with customers. So they're not soliciting feedback. They're delivering on the feedback that was obtained by inbound marketing at the left-hand side of this diagram. So inbound marketing takes the voice of the customer into the organization. Outbound marketing, which would use sales roadmap. And to get to your strategy and technology, that would be part of the overall strategy. That might include technology roadmaps, which I'm not talking about here, but also would include the vision of the company. So these are not inconsistent with what you asked, Scott, but would layer upon or add to what you're asking about or describing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Great. So let's bring this home. So it's Thursday, it's in the afternoon, you're going to go home soon, and tomorrow, Friday, or certainly Monday, you're going to want to come back and apply this stuff. Hopefully that's why you're here. I've got some steps for how you can get something out of it. What to do now? What's my call to action? Figure out what you currently do. Is it working for you? Do you have articulated these different roadmaps for different management flows? Do you need them? You may not. But audit them. And then identify your needs and your audience. The third point I've highlighted, because that's the critical point. How does it fit? Steve's problem was that he was having what I call a Seymour exercise, i.e. Seymour, or rock fetching, that's another term I have for it, where you send out your minions to create these product roadmaps that are used by no one. So you have to determine how it fits in the management flow. How does it fit in your priorities and budgets? How does it fit in the PMO office communicating product dependencies and timelines? How does it fit in your sales process? Then collect the data, share it with your stakeholders. Are you delivering things that are meaningful for them, and iterate if not? But basically, with the materials that we have here and what you've learned, you can go back on Monday and implement this. It's not hard.
You keep going, Joe.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go. You keep going.
Okay. So, if we look at what your true north is, your true north, as we've opened up this discussion, is really finding that strategy and executing on it. And you can find that roadmaps, if used properly, and as Scott said, as you really think carefully about dividing them up for individual purposes, can really lead your organization forward and execute on that strategy. So, if you look at the three things that we're trying to do, which is communicate your strategy, inform your execution, and increase your revenues. Roadmaps can serve all those masters and all those management flows. And in fact, if you look at, if we go back to Steve, and we talk about Steve's problem, you in fact can really do it right, not what Steve did and did it wrong. You have the knowledge, the capability, and the understanding to use roadmaps the way they were intended.
And so, John, we've got two kind of related questions, which is, I think what's really interesting that you've touched on here for me is really thinking of the roadmap as a communication tool and a way to execute on strategy, which I think definitely see a lot of teams getting stuck in moving things up and down on their Trello board or left and right between columns versus thinking bigger picture. But then what someone's brought up is, what if your company doesn't have a a clear strategy, or you think has picked the wrong strategy and you're trying to build a roadmap to it, are you using the roadmap to disprove what someone's come up with? Or how do you think about building roadmaps in an environment like that?
I was afraid that question would come up. That happens to be relatively common. And there's two problems, Scott. The first problem is that oftentimes there's a strategy, but the executives think it's so secret that they can't share it with other managers. And so it's not communicated. So oftentimes if you can get your hands on a strategy or talk to the executives, you can figure out what your true north is. And then I would say it's up to the head of product, the CMO, to take whatever exists for strategy or its vacuum, but create one. In lieu of a CEO-driven strategy, the CMO should create it, and their folks in the product organization should execute it upon it. Roadmaps are not going to solve the problem. That has to deal with really working with your CMO to create a proxy strategy if one doesn't exist. That is good. The CEO will like it.
Awesome. And I'm just going to cast out, are there any more questions while, and I'll fire one at John while we're just waiting. Now's the time to start sending some questions through. John, another question I've got is, where do you see people like really going wrong with roadmaps, aside from just using a Trello board? What are some of the, the top three things that people get wrong when they're creating a roadmap or communicating a roadmap?
I think the biggest flaw is that they're not inserted into a decision flow. I mean, the reason that roadmaps are created is to communicate strategy, influence of execution, and improve sales. If you don't insert the roadmap into those decision flows and management flows, you're not going to have any input or any impact. So where I've seen most organizations stumble is they create product roadmaps in a vacuum, not to serve the process. And again, that's not going to be solved by a roadmap. That has to be senior management agreeing that they need some sort of product portfolio strategy or overall corporate product strategy, or even the four elements of the corporate strategy I described: financial, organizational, product, and M&A. So
it's almost like, the product roadmap is useless unless people have bought into it, unless it's actually being executed on, which probably means, it's being reviewed weekly or monthly, or, it's part of some regular, almost think like sprint review or something it's got to be part of, whether that sprint is at a small engineering team level or organizational level. It's got to be worked in somehow, right, and reviewed and actively engaged with. It's kind of a living document in that way, right?
Exactly right, Scott. I would say it changes a little bit more slowly in organizations that I've worked with. They probably tend to be larger maybe than some of the companies here, but in those organizations, the corporate strategy is tweaked once a year. Maybe it's updated quarterly. And if it changes quarterly, that would be communicated. Otherwise, the overall corporate strategy is communicated roughly once a year, goes out to everyone. The execution strategy probably would be communicated monthly, maybe weekly, depending on where you are in the sprints and the various teams that have deliverable. And the sales strategy, the sales roadmap, though, is delivered at the end of the product towards product launch. And so it basically takes as inputs the other roadmaps as well as what the team has been able to execute.
No worries.
But it's a living document.
Any other questions or anything for John or myself about roadmaps? Anything on anyone's mind? What's that?
One.
I'd be really interested to find out what's not working, Scott. Those that are participating.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's one question, and that's a great idea, John. Someone said, how far out should your roadmaps go? from Simon.
Yeah. I think that the root answer, the right answer, if you don't have a good answer, is 3 years. But I'd say it should be at least two releases in front of you. In fast-moving technology companies, you can't predict the future. So I think having the next release and the follow-on release is sufficient. Whatever time horizon that is, your release case determines the view of your roadmap. But I think we need to be practical here and not theoretical. And you have to see beyond your current release. So that's why I say the release after the current release.
It's interesting you say 3 years, being at the heart of Silicon Valley where things seem to last only a week or two. Trends can last a week or two. I'm really curious about your answer of 3 years, because that's almost the anti-answer of anything you would hear in and around Silicon Valley. So is that because you need to be able to see where the market's going and where your product's going? Is that why you say something like 3 years?
Well, Scott, I'm answering it for both B2B and B2C customers.
Yep.
B2C customers can make a release every week. B2B can't do that because their customers can't absorb change that fast.
Yep.
And in fact, their CIOs may be only able to accommodate a major step change every year. So that's why 3 years is kind of the road answer. But heck, if you release on a cadence every quarter, then I would say you'd want to look 2 quarters out. In other words, use the clock rate of your company to infer what the distance view of your roadmap. And I'd say you should pace it on the release you're working on plus the estimated time of the next release. Those two should be sufficient for a decent roadmap without fabrication.
Now we've got another 5-10 minutes. You had a question, John. You wanted to throw that. You were just about to throw a question to our audience. Do you want to throw one out?
Yeah. Well, I think these questions that you've generated are really good, and I'd like to hear from the audience about what doesn't work with the roadmap they're doing, and what they'd like to do more with it. Maybe we didn't scratch their itch, and I'd be really curious about what other challenges organizations are having with roadmaps, or why they attended this session. So I'd really like to hear about that.
Over to you, team. Seems like you solved everyone's problems, John. They should all be zero roadmap issues. I think maybe just to get anyone thinking like things that I think of issues around process, getting people to engage, drawing roadmaps up but not having them become a reality are definitely things that I see. So just to see if there's anything anyone wants to throw out there. All right. No more questions. I just want to say a big thank you to John for spending the time, especially late at night in California. Oh, this always happens. Start drawing a line, and there we go. We've got a few coming through. So we've got, just before we close off then, is yeah, right. Okay, now it rains questions out. So, John, first one is, how do you roadmap prioritization of research problems, which, given you've done some genuine research and patented some of your work, I think is a really interesting question. So that's from Sally, has asked, how do you roadmap prioritization of research problems?
Good question. So I'm not sure this might be a hammer looking for a nail. So you solved important problems. Is that correct? Is that my understanding? And you're trying to figure out how you plan the solutions of those problems?
Oh, it might be. Prioritization of research. Yeah, I wonder whether it's customer research or like scientific research. Sally, maybe in chat you could clarify a bit, Sally.
Pretty big distinction.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we're
solving for customers. Yeah. So I think the issue there is that in the case of solving problems for customers, this is a quantitative research problem. So it's not so good. I mean, it's good to understand what customer inquiries. So this goes back to inbound marketing versus outbound marketing. So in inbound marketing, what you want to do is try and understand some color and fabric around the relevance of these problems. Bring your engineers, believe it or not, and developers to meet with customers, and if it's B2B, or you can do that easily with focus groups, try and understand the nuance or focus about the solution to those problems. Make sure that the solution, in fact, addresses the problems that customers state, because often they're ill-formed. Then you use quantitative research to, in fact, verify if that solution, which you've understood through qualitative research, is worth solving. Once you have the answer to those questions, i.e. you've got the solution to the customer's problem, and you've got a relative priority, then you put it on the roadmap, and there should be a discussion with Agile organizations monthly to rejigger the relative priorities on the roadmap. And if the priorities of these customer problems exceed the importance of the customer problems you're solving with the next release, conceivably you could just move the development team over. You could hire a contracting team. You could stop the development or postpone it.
John, it seems what I've taken from what you're just saying is you can't really easily roadmap research, like your customer research. It's a different process. I mean, you can probably plan out the activities, like draw out a bit of a project plan. But you're saying it's not something that you can roadmap in the sense of a product roadmap.
Right. Product roadmap is after you've agreed on the problem and the solution and the relative budget and plan to instantiate it. They're useful tools to communicate it.
Yeah.
It's not really good for planning research. Process is a different one.
So you're saying a project plan, in your view, a project plan is the mechanism to plan that out, and then a roadmap is when you know what you've done the research. So the research is the input to the roadmap. There you go, Sally's. Looks like we've helped Sally go back and say, no, we don't need a roadmap. You're asking me for the wrong thing. I'm going to give you a project plan.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, one of the things, Scott,
yeah,
is after the research is done with the project plan, you have to go back to the executive and say, where does this fit on the roadmap? Are we doing it now, or are we doing it when we can get to it later?
Yeah.
Key priority decision that needs to be made.
All right, awesome. Next question is, I'm going to say I'm done answering with this one, and we're going to pick up another one from Rob, which is, what software, John, do you feel is the best software for building roadmaps?
There are so many. AHA is one. Product Plan is another. I use Excel. I think if you simply look at Quora, there's some great descriptions of the top software. The two that I mentioned, I think, are some that I've seen that are really good. But frankly, the usual problem, Scott and Rob, is not the software. It's the process. And so what you can put together is the data and representing it. And it's very trivial to do in relatively simple means. You've got complex organizations with tons of products, then I would say to step up to products from those two vendors.
Okay. Hopefully that helps, Rob. Next question up is from Andrew, which is, could we get a must-read list from John? I think he's saying not including John's book. What because he's going to read that anyway, I reckon. No, Andrew's asking what's the must-read list on roadmaps for you?
Well, that's a really great question. And I think one of the best books on road mapping that's ever been done is a publication from Motorola by Willard and McLeod. And it's actually on technology roadmaps.
Okay.
It's a publicly available company, and if you email me, I can get you a reference to it.
Yeah, I think...
Also, there are seminars that are given that are excellent. I know here in the States by Dr. Papp, and he's very good. And there's some experts in England as well that I can recommend that are good. There hasn't really been any books on it per se. It's touched on in those texts, but not dived to in any detail. But the Motorola piece by Willard and McLeod is phenomenal. And even though it's tech roadmaps, it's extensible to all road mapping activity.
Yeah, awesome.
As well as what the app does here.
We'll get those in the follow-up email to everyone. We'll include a lot of things you asked for, some links to John's books and more. Awesome. Next question. This will be the last question because we've got to wrap up in a few minutes. So question is from Jack. To what fidelity do you need to understand your solution before adding it to the roadmap?
No. All you need to know is the problem is worth solving, and that you have some envelope around what potential solutions will be. Because in general, putting it on the roadmap then causes the CTO and the CMO or their organization then to work on what that looks like. So they take something that's extremely low fidelity, and engineering and development working with product will come out with a very high fidelity product attempted by collaboration. So very low fidelity. They can be thoughts or dreams, frankly.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
Is that your experience? You've done this quite a bit, Scott, and you could answer this.
I love, definitely something I learned early on is that I love that you said problem, being able to put the problem on the roadmap instead of the something else. So what's the problem that you're trying to solve? Because it's often easier to rally everyone around and understand it than something like, an acronym like TSQ version 3 is nowhere near as good to rally people around as, improving performance by 10 seconds across the entire product is much easier for everyone to rally around because we know performance is an issue and we're losing people over performance, or, reduce the steps in our sign-up flow so that people are signing up in 5 minutes instead of half an hour. I think those seem to be the fidelity that I think about now in terms of the problem and stating it in problem terms rather than as a software engineer by background. I used to come at it from basically a list of tasks I was going to do, and I've definitely moved away from that. But I think if you're problem focused, then the fidelity almost doesn't matter. It's just you could have a problem on there that takes 2 weeks to solve, but if it's a big problem for a customer, then it deserves to be on there. All right.
I agree. In fact, it's the problem and the goals that you described which really rally developers. In other words, if they've got a clear goal, not the task, but the goal, like to reduce response time or improve checkout rate at the checkout counter, that's something tangible they can go for. They can sink their teeth in. You're absolutely right. Fidelity of the problem is important.
All righty. That's all we got time for today, folks. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you got something out of it. If you didn't get something, or you've got follow-up questions, please email them through. There'll be a follow-up email going out, and there will also be John's tips that have been asked for and we've spoken about. And I'll also throw in there that there's a few more webinars coming up, so look out for them. There's one on stakeholder management, one on AI and product management, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you for your time today, everyone.
Good day, everyone.
The template, yep, we'll do. Yeah, pop, if there's anything specific that we've spoken about that you really want, make sure you pop it in the chat so we can make sure we don't miss it.